Hello, and welcome to our interview with Mr. Biteys Presents. My name is Raven, they, them, from Nemeton Studios, and we're partnered up with a little-known independent studio, up and coming in the gaming and creative communities, Mr. Biteys Presents. Today, we have Alan Jessup from Mr. Biteys and one of the masterminds behind the tabletop game that is currently in beta test and layout, The Shattered World. Alan?
Yep, and I'm Alan Jessup. I am the owner of Mr. Biteys Games and Hobbies, also known as Mr. Biteys Presents. And we are currently designing our new tabletop RPG, the modern fantasy epic, The Shattered World. Yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. Glad to be here and helping you out with this fantastic endeavor that we've already been, we've been working on this for about, year and a half to 2 years now?
Yes, I had the first formal start of this a year and a half ago, last November. Does not feel that long. God.
Definitely doesn't. So, can you tell us a bit about yourself, your background, when it comes to game design? What inspired you? When did you first start getting into that?
Sure. So, game design as a whole, I've basically been doing ever since I was a kid. I was always very much that nerd. I know it's hard to tell looking at me. It's really not. But back in the day, you remember the old school choose your own adventure books?
Oh, absolutely. I used to love those.
Oh yeah. So, back in the day they had a version of those where they came with one of those old 3.5 or the larger floppy disks, and as you read through the story, it would tell you, okay, change this line of code to read this, change this line of code to read this, and then at the end, you would play your computer game based on the choices you made in the book. That completely blew 8-year-old me's mind.
The good old days.
Oh yeah, text adventures. And that was my first real introduction to game design, to not just playing games, but figuring out how to make them to where someone else could play them. And it was a short step from there to becoming my group's forever DM. Always a fun position. And I've been designing one shots and homebrew campaigns and modifying systems and the like ever since.
Do you have a favorite system?
Oh, that's a very loaded question. So
Favorite tabletop gaming system, I should say.
favorite tabletop gaming system, my first love will always be Vampire the Masquerade. It has its issues. Dear God in heaven, does it have its issues? But it was my first serious RPG. It's where I made my first character, Bob the Malkavian, and yeah, I've played D&D and Rifts and Bessem and Pathfinder and Palladium games and you name it.
Starfinder,
Starfinder, Pathfinder, the whole nine, Cyberpunk, etc. But Vampire was where I really fell in love with tabletop RPGs, and it's really trying to think of how to phrase this. So D&D and its offshoots very much came from that wargaming background, which I never really got into. I never played like Warhammer. I always wanted to, but outside a couple of the video games, I never had $5,000 for a 6-point army. Sorry, guys.
And be prepared to throw 20 dice, your opponent to throw 20 dice, and not do anything.
Right, if I want to throw 20 dice, I'll play some Exalted.
Sure.
But, and that has a whole nother list of problems, but the fact that Vampire approached the tabletop RPG from a narrative standpoint more than a wargaming standpoint, I think is what caught my attention. Again, like I said, Vampire, especially first edition Vampire, very much had its issues, but I loved the idea of not just a war game, but a cooperative storytelling game. And that's really what pushed me into game design as a whole, was seeing the fact that both like D&D and its offshoots and White Wolf and the storytelling game systems were approaching the exact same thing. Let's make a tabletop RPG, but from completely different viewpoints, leading to completely different systems, design look-ats, and the whole nine, and I really loved that.
A lot of those systems were really great for narrative.
Yes. a lot of them they were designed for narration first and gameplay second, and that's very much not the not the plan here with the Shattered World, but that heavy emphasis on not just narration but mechanics affecting the narration and narration affecting the mechanics, the interplay between the two, that is what I'm focusing on for the Shattered World.
Speaking of which, can you give us a little bit of an overview of like the setting and themes? We'll get into the gameplay mechanics later.
Okay, so setting and themes first and foremost. So my two big loves when it comes to genres are modern fantasy and alternate history. I love that idea of like, okay, in Tolkien style high fantasy, you've got your sword and shield and fireball and high mage and elf and dwarf. And then in modern fantasy, you'll still have bits and pieces of that, right? Like, your characters may walk around with a shotgun in one hand and a fireball in the other, but you also have cell phones, and you also have modern contrivances. Like, you get in your car and drive to your next mission. You don't walk next to a horse. The interplay between the two, I first ran into it really with like Running with the Demon and Terry Brooks's old Word in the Void, and then of course Stephen King's Eyes of the Dragon.
Hmm.
Or not Eyes of the Dragon. I'm sorry, the Dark Tower series.
Oh,
God, it's
great
been
series.
oh yeah, had its moments, had its not good moments, but it had its moments. It had its moments, and
That can
then
be said about every story.
oh, it really can. It really can. But alternate history, I am, again, I'm a nerd. At this point, it is what it is. I've always loved the idea of looking at this event in history and what would happen if one little thing twitched. Right? Like the classic example for alternate history is, oh God, I'm blanking on his name. Harry Turtledove. He wrote a series based on the American Civil War, sometimes known as the Southern Victory series or the Order 191 timeline. Extremely long story short, in the American Civil War, right before the Battle of Gettysburg, this Southern courier had the plans, right? Robert E. Lee's battle plans, and he was supposed to
Hmm.
take them to all of Robert E. Lee's other generals and colonels and the like. Only in our timeline, he dropped them. He lost them. And two Union privates, who I assume were immediately, ranked up to colonel, discovered them and turned them in. So Robert E. Lee's whole big push into the North knew about it and could prepare and plan.
Yeah.
The Order 191, the Southern Victory series, basically goes, okay, what if that courier didn't drop those plans? How would things change? And then he ends up running with this like 14 book series from the end of the American Civil War till the end of World War II. And you get to see a bunch of little things like how reality changed. For instance, being from upstate New York, you and I are both very well acquainted with Mark Twain.
Oh, of course.
While Samuel Clemens existed, Mark Twain never did.
I can see how that would change things.
Yep, Samuel Clemens was old money, and when the South became its own country, all his family lands were in Tennessee. He lost them. So in the series, he never comes back from out west. He stays in San Francisco and is just some newspaper editor. Little things right like that. And then I lied, there is a third great love of mine, and that's the old exploration novels. I grew up on Swiss Family Robinson and Robinson Crusoe and the whole nine. I love, or like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's version of The Lost World. While those
All the great
stories,
adventures.
yes, while those stories absolutely have their issues and problems, let's not
Some a
pretend they
product
don't.
of their times.
That's the polite way of putting it. Yes, they are very much products of their times, but I love that sense of adventure, that sense of excitement, that sense of change. And that is the major theme of the Shattered World, is change. In the Shattered World, it's modern fantasy. Magic exists, and it's always been known to exist.
So
Five?
there's just mages,
Yes.
people that can do these amazing things,
Yes.
almost superpower-esque, but not quite
Yes. So
thematically.
Yes, the main thing to remember for the Shattered World, the way it differs from a lot of modern fantasy, number one, magic is basically bloodline based. Like, this is the Fireball family, and this is the Alchemy family, and this is the etc., etc. And random individuals will develop magic, but they tend to be typically fought over almost immediately, and all of the real power in this world is held with the families. Almost
Mostly the
every
elites.
Yes.
Imagine that.
Um Almost every person in the Shattered World has some form of quote unquote magic, but for about 99% of people, saying I have magic translates to I have magic. When I break my ankle, it heals in 5 weeks instead of 6. I have magic. I can lift something roughly the size of a thermos with my mind 30 feet away up at a reasonable pace, right? Like minor things.
More tricks or just something to make something more expedient
Right.
or just a
So,
little more convenient.
right. If you're familiar with, or our listeners are familiar with Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, basically everybody has prestidigitation.
Or
All
like those
normal
minor
people.
cantrips.
Yes, very minor cantrips. You can season your food with a glance, things like that, which is handy. I would love to be able to do that. But,
Same here. Love eating.
yes. So, 5 years ago, there was an event that in world is known as the Helmyra incident, which is definitely not named after my hometown in any way, shape, or form. This portal opened, what they call a tear. The thing about the tear is a tear, even before it fully appears, gives off a form of radiation. No one really understands it yet. This radiation can make people become what were initially called infected, and now, when the game starts, they're called enhanced. The thing
What
about
wrong with them being affected by these portals?
So, not everyone who is exposed to a portal becomes infected or enhanced, but everyone who becomes enhanced or infected was exposed to a portal. What this does is twofold. Number one, that is what makes the character a player character, a PC. That is what gives access to the new Destiny system, which I will go over later. But the other thing it does is it completely cuts you off from magic as it is understood in the Shattered World. It
So no
does
more
no
cantrips, no
more
more.
cantrips, no more nothing. You could have been this reality's version of Gandalf and Harry Dresden and Voldemort and Harry Potter all mixed into one in a blender. And sorry, dude, you're a level 1 peasant.
That would make for some crazy political issues.
Yes, exactly. The world is very much in upheaval. Stepping into the void and the uncertainty and the fear are 8 organizations pulled from different walks of life. One of the organizations is basically Amazon. It's a multinational conglomerate that focuses on selling things. One of them is a former Catholic order. One of them is an order of supernatural hunters. I won't go through all 8 now, but these 8 organizations have stepped forward. They've started gathering up as many of these enhanced as they could once it was realized that they do have their own powers now, and for most of them, they can become stronger than they ever could have been. But again, these new abilities, these destinies as they're called, are not understood at all. Again, everything that's happening story-wise has been within the last 5 years. So think about now, you and me sitting here today, 5 years ago was 2019. A lot has happened in that time period.
Oh, absolutely. So in a 5-year time span, any number of things in this alternate history could have happened
Yes.
that completely changed society, just like we did.
Yep. So that is, among other things, that's one of the big narrative hooks of the Shattered World is how do you go on when all this has happened? The infected, the enhanced, thought they lost everything. And then now all of a sudden there's this new potential. And then you have, again, these old families They have been the ones setting the rules for the world for millennia. Are they being replaced? Is this just a new form of magic that they don't understand? Is it a threat? Is it something that can be weaponized? If you know a way to completely cut somebody off from magic and there's a rival family you don't like, that's a weapon. Can we weaponize it? Like, all of these are things that players can explore and figure out in the game. The Shattered World will have, I'll go ahead and say this now, the Shattered World will have an overall meta plot. That being said, if you don't like part of the meta plot, change it. Your home game is your home game, obviously.
So there'll
But
be
there-
opportunities for people to create their own narratives within this meta plot without having to stand by it entirely, or at least being controlled by it.
Yes, absolutely. For example, I've been playing Pathfinder pretty much since Pathfinder 1E came out, and until about 3 months ago, I've never actually played a character in Galarian, in the Pathfinder official setting. It's all been homebrew. Do it. Like, this is a narrative, a cooperative game. If the story you want to tell, make some changes to the meta plot, make those changes. Like, God, with my blessing, please enjoy your story. That is what is important.
Sounds like there's plenty for everybody.
Oh yeah.
Let's talk about what makes this game unique in itself, sets it apart from some of the others. What are the dice for this game?
So, this is a 2d12 based system. I have always loved the D12. It's very much the redheaded stepchild of dice. And that was one of the first things that I knew that I wanted for this game was I'm going to use 2d12. All of your actions are very much choose your ability score, choose your skill appropriately, roll 2d12, add them together, and then any other miscellaneous bonuses.
Similar to other tabletop games,
Yes.
focusing on 2d12s as opposed to d20, d100.
The only thing you will ever need to play is your character sheet, which you'll be able to get free, pen, paper, pencil. That's on you, that's not on me. 2d12, and then the books. And that's it. Your damage is static. So rather than, for instance, in your OGL style games, a dagger does 1d4, so you roll a 1d4 and then add your strength and blah blah blah. With this, a dagger does X damage, and that's what it does. And you'll have different merits and abilities that will modify that, but you'll only ever have to roll your dice once to see if you hit.
So fairly simplified.
Yes, that's one of the main things that sets our game apart from the others. We went through, let me back up, let me not go down my rabbit hole of thought, I apologize. ADHD is fun. So, the primary difference is that our game at launch is going to have and fully integrate 3 modes of play that you typically don't see together at launch in a game. Here's what I mean by that. So, Mode 1 is your standard gameplay. That's where you fight the adversaries, discuss things with NPCs, fight, vehicle combat, all the standard gameplay you'd expect from a tabletop RPG. Mode 2, Navigation Mode. So, I mentioned earlier the tears. The other big thing about the tears is you can actually go through them once they've been stabilized, and each tear is basically an entrance to a pocket dimension. Each tear is different, and there will be rules for creating your own. But this tear may open up to an idyllic kind of Lord of the Rings style forest. This one may open up to this ruined abandoned city. This one may open up to an undersea cavern. This one may open up to the cold vacuum of space. Don't go through that one. But
Not if you're not prepared.
Right.
They're all like little pocket dimensions or different potential cosmologies of the world.
Yes. Yes. The best way to think about it is if you blow a bubble, the main world of the Shattered World is that bubble, and then all the little soap bubbles, whatever, that are clinging to the side of it, each one of those is a little pocket dimension that a tear can let you into. So that brings me to Mode 2, Navigation Mode. Because through the tear is this pocket dimension, there are no GPS satellites, right? You can't Google Maps your way to figuring out where anything is. And no one else has really been there, so you can't go down to the gas station and get an old map. It's completely new. You have to explore this area. That's navigation mode. That's where you go through and figure out where things are, landmarks, the whole nine. That also leads me to mode 3, which is construction mode. That is where you focus on crafting, yes, but also settlement building. Again, the Shattered World is one that until 5 years ago was largely static. The families controlled everything, either officially or unofficially. There's no real way to advance, there's no real way to grow, to change. Minor things, yes, but not big things. Now all of a sudden there's these tears, and now there's land on the other side of those tears. You can leave your country and go to the new world. You can, yeah, sure, there's dangers there, but is it worth it? Maybe. So that is the other big narrative thing for mode 3. It's all about that gold rush and what that means for people, right? Like, can you escape the old systems? Is that even something you want to do? Or do you just want the old systems to be set up to where you're the one in charge?
Sounds like it lends pretty well to a creative narrative, not even a structure, but an opportunity for
Yep.
players. Not just for city building, but well, we'll have an item crafting system,
Yep.
and so it's basically what other game systems call a downtime.
Yeah, there's absolutely a lot of similarities there. The big difference is because we're including this at launch, it's not going to be like in other games where, okay, I've got the downtime splat book, and now I hope the next splat book will include something that references this. This is a core major component that the game is tuned around. One of my biggest complaints, and here is where I'm gonna talk a little crap about a game that I absolutely love, and please don't take anything I'm about to say as too against the game. This is just me pointing out one of its flaws. Pathfinder First Edition came out with Ultimate Campaign and Kingmaker, and it had something like that, right? Like a downtime and a construction mode. The problem is the construction mode was not really integrated with the base game at all. It used a completely different monetary system compared to the rest of the game. It included warnings that you can absolutely go from gold, which, is Pathfinder's base wealth system, to this new capital, but you really don't want to go the other way around because it can really screw everything up. There was just no real interconnectivity between the two. And then there would be, 2-3 years go by before you got another book that even referenced downtime and construction mode. So until then, you were just kind of sitting around waiting. And that brings me to one of the other big differences from our game, The Shattered World, to others, is its interconnection and modularity. I have already sat down and sketched out a rough 5 to 10 year plan for the Shattered World.
That's quite a lot.
Yes.
That's some big plans.
And again, this is my first game. God knows this is probably going to crash and burn and it's not going to work. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm not okay with that, but I'm okay with that. I am aiming for perfection, and if I don't get it, at least I was aiming for it. But one of the things I've made sure to do is not every system that we've sat down and tested is going to make the core rulebook. There's just too much. We sat down and, okay, the core rulebook and the adversary handbook are going to be about this. Here are the mechanics. We already know book 1, book 2, book 3 are going to be about A, B, and C. So let's start looking at those mechanics. Let's make sure they interact with the core mechanics we already have. Let's make sure they interact with each other. That's a huge problem that other games have had that we're trying really hard to not emulate. D&D, for example, the 3.x system, was notorious for having splat books that would be perfectly balanced against that splat book, but nothing else. We don't want another psionics issue. Or Rifts, for example, had two damage types, regular standard damage and mega damage was just better in every way, shape, or form. So they're like the systems didn't work together. We're working on making sure that our game works.
So a world building focus with a plug and play aspects.
Yes. And thank you for bringing up the plug and play. That's the other big thing. Modularity. This is something we've approached with both our crafting system, our weapon system, the construction system, our adversaries. Everything is designed to be changed. So, for example, adversaries. All of our adversaries, and I know you've been working hard at them, adversaries are all based off real world mythology. That being said, that is kind of the problem from a design perspective because, for example, the Babao is a boogeyman, right? Long arms, claws, eats people, hides in shadows. The basics are all there, but the Babao is from Northern Italian, Slavic, Lithuanian, Eastern European, that area. And in every little region where it's known, it's slightly different. So which one do we make canon? Which one is the correct Babao and which one isn't?
All of them.
All of them, exactly. All of them. There will be a core Babao in the game, but the adversary system uses positive and negative impacts to modify how the monsters play. If you grew up knowing that the Babao had really short arms but big teeth, take away the long reach impact and give it the sharp teeth impact, for example, right? Like, I'm not using real names because I'm blanking on them right now, but that is how you do it. If you're talking about indigenous tribes, everyone had slightly different versions of their myths. Very much plug and play. One of the issues with the Shattered World, with us in general, this is a two-person team. We are doing everything we can to treat every culture and every character and every person that we put into our game with the utmost respect. But there's only so much two people can know and two people can do. I guarantee you, I am going to have like half a dozen things in there that from my perspective are great. They're fine. They show perfect respect to the culture that I'm pulling from. And somebody from that culture is going to look at it and go, what the crap were you thinking? I'm sorry?
Can't please everybody.
Right. That's the other main reason why we wanted the plug and play mentality. We're not going to be able to please everybody. It's not going to happen. A, that doesn't mean you don't try, but B, you provide the tools to where they can modify it themselves to make it fit.
To make it valid for what's right for them, for their playstyle, for their
Yes.
for their own worlds, for their own cultures,
Yes,
and
exactly.
everything being valid.
Yes.
So that's what you would say is your approach to world building and the creative immersiveness is sort of a top down.
Yes. So
Uh,
I very much, sorry, not to cut you off.
nope.
I very much started with a top-down approach. I knew from the very beginning that for the Shattered World, there were a couple main bullet points that I wanted that had to be present. Number one, the name of the game is The Shattered World for a reason. It had to be able to occur anywhere in the world. A group of players should be able to set their game in their own hometown regardless of where they happen to live. We've all seen action movies, we've all seen Roland Emmerich movies. We all know when the aliens attack and when the world explodes, the bad guys go to New York City and they go to London, and sometimes they'll go to Beijing if they want to corner that market, and that's really it. The rest of the world doesn't care. The initial incident, the inciting incident of the Shattered World, again, I called it the Helmira incident. It took place in my hometown of Elmira, New York, which is this very Rust Belt, small town in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York. Some of the main point of view characters in the core rulebook that you're going to read about come from Finland. One of them comes from Tanzania, Africa. You should be able to play, if you want to set your campaign in Australia or Africa or South America or Central America, you can. That was very important to me. Number two, had to be a modern fantasy system, heavily feature exploring the unknown. And then number three, because of numbers 1 and 2, it had to both interact with any real world culture and avoid stereotyping or bashing them. Very much character, not caricature, if that makes sense. Finally, I very much wanted a street level feel to the game. There's nothing wrong with power fantasy. We all like being able to bench press the Tarrasque. I get it. But
Flexibility is there, but not the focus.
right. What I was going for with the Shattered World as far as power level, basically, I love that sense of danger lurking around every corner, and characters that are strong, but not, I'm gonna go play pool using planets as the billiard balls for a weekend trip level strong, right? Like, we're not going for Silver Age Superman where he did a super sneeze and wiped out a solar system. You'll have characters that at their upper level, they may punch through a brick wall, but they're not going to rip a building out of the ground and use it as a baseball bat.
So again, that leads us right back to something for everybody, where you could play an investigative game, a horror game, just city building, if that's what they want to do, gang turf wars, or just in general, whatever creative floats your boat.
Yes, so
HP Lovecraft Insanity.
Exactly. So one of the things to remark is in the core rulebook, the tears, while they're going to be explained mechanically, where they came from, what's causing them, is not going to be addressed in the core rulebook because it's not known. Now, if you want to tell a story where that's known, awesome.
That's a part of the meta plot.
Yes, that is a part of the meta plot that will be revealed as books come out. But again, just because these tears happen doesn't even mean you have to go through them. When you come to a tear, you can either stabilize it or close it. You could play a character, you could have a story that very much revolves around, we became infected, but we still work for the families, and now we're going to find all of these tears and immediately shut them down so no one else becomes like us. Or you could play a game where you're trying to find out what happened. Maybe your character thinks that all of these pocket dimensions are somehow linked. That is a potential story hook. The possibilities very much are endless, and I know that's very much a buzzword and everybody says that, but with this it is. If you want to play a horror story or a horror style game, cool, you go through the first tear and it opens up into a never-ending boiler room. This tear brings you to the Eye of Cthulhu, right? Like, the possibilities are endless, and future expansions and future books will reflect that.
And they'll each have their own themes and some mechanic improvements as we go along.
One of the things that the core rulebook states, when you're in the equipment section, each section has a little introduction by the guy who's pulling the book together in universe. He mentioned something along the lines of, this is not every bit of gear, or for the destinies, these are not every ability that I've found, but these are the ones that are the most understood and the most documented. And then as the game progresses, as more books come out, more will be revealed to the players.
Players can choose to integrate those or set them off to the side and say,
yep, do not feel forced to use it. If something doesn't work for your game, it doesn't work for your game, and that's what's important. One of the things that I think with the internet, and this is going to be me ranting for a second, I apologize, but one of the things that I think we have forgotten with the internet bringing us together as a hobby, that's great, right? Like, that's amazing. But I think we've forgotten that not every table plays the same, and not every table is comfortable with the same things that every table is. What is comfortable for players at this table is not going to be on the table for this other group, and that's perfectly okay. That is fine. As far as a quote unquote rating, like a movie rating, the base game aims for a kind of PG-13 rating, right? Like, there's some scary stuff, and it's a dangerous world and a dangerous system. You can very much die, but that doesn't mean this table is going to be PG-13. This table may be a rated R game. This table may be a rated G game. It very much comes down to the table, and that's why session zero, right? Like sitting down with your players and the narrator. The narrator is the Shattered Worlds version of a game master or dungeon master. Long story short.
Cooperative storytelling.
Yes. Everybody sitting down, okay, this is the type of story we all want to tell. This is what we're comfortable with. This is not what we're comfortable with. And making sure everybody is on the same page is vital for any game, but especially this, because the Shattered World, you can do anything. Yeah, end rant. Sorry.
Well, in some ways it sounds fantastic, in other ways super complex and with all these mechanics. So how do you strike a balance between that depth and the accessibility for the game?
Oh, God. That is the billion-dollar question. It's one of those things that's really easy to answer in theory, but not so much in practice. I mean, in theory, all you have to do is strip out all the junk rules, make sure what you do have is easy and versatile enough to answer any possible situation your players find themselves in, simple enough that the intent behind it is perfectly obvious to anyone, regardless of their experience with RPGs and rule systems in general. It's easy, right? Anyone can do that.
If that were easy, we'd all be game masters. We'd all have written all these books.
Right. But the first thing we did was go back to basics. We looked at a dozen of our favorite games from a mechanical perspective and just asked why, right? Like, why is this the way it is? Why does this mechanic exist? Good example of this is just action economy, right? That's basic. Most games had different types of actions you could use in your turn, and specific tasks required specific actions. Attacking required a standard action, moving required a move action, drawing a weapon required a move action unless you had a high enough attack value, then you could combine it with a move unless you also had this special feat, then it was free, and you had intermediate actions and free actions and Bob's action, and it was too complicated. So we said, okay, well, what if we got rid of all of that? And we just have actions. And we sat
Similar
down.
to Pathfinder 2.0, or the second edition did something simpler.
Yes. Our goal was always to start with simplicity and then work towards integration. Sorry, can't English today. We redid the action economy. Once we did that, well, then now that's going to change how our stat system works. Do we really need 6 stats? Well, we sat down and looked and decided no, we really don't. And then we moved from there. Again, our goal was always start simple, make sure everything we do put in place makes sense, interacts well, and has a place. There were, God, an easy dozen more systems I would love to throw in right now, and we're setting them to the side for now. They may make an appearance later in different books, but they just didn't make sense narratively at this time, or they potentially overshadowed or were overshadowed by another mechanic already in place, so why? Yeah, so that's not really an answer, but that's my answer.
It is an answer because
It's hard. It's very hard to balance all of that. Again, our goal was simple enough for anybody to understand. I have taken this to a couple different local conventions to beta test, to alpha test, let's be honest. I've run it with a couple different play groups of people of various
Age ranges.
experience. Yeah. A couple people that have never touched a tabletop RPG in their life. Couple people that can frankly rattle off rules to systems I've never played. And our goal was to make it easy enough to where anyone could sit down, understand, and play, but enough complexity and crunch to let you play over and over and over again. If I'm playing a big dumb fighter who walks around and punches things, he's going to play completely different from that grumpy sniper who's going to play completely different from that smooth talking rogue or that politically connected mage. And I wanted there to be enough crunch to make all of those possible and to reward system mastery. Right now, it looks like we've done it, but
So versatility and character concept without being okay, if you're not making this build, you're doing it wrong.
right, I hate that. So many times in games, you will come across correct answers or wrong answers. Or, again, I know I said it was my first love, and again, I'm not trying to bash any current game out there. I'm not trying to be negative, but Vampire the Masquerade, the current 5th edition, is a great example of that, where there are discipline powers, disciplines being vampiric magic, basically. Long story short. But there are discipline powers where you have to choose every level, pick one, and then that informs your build. And there are some discipline abilities that are amazing, and I would love to pick them, but they require an ability that was useless, and I'm never going to pick that ability that I really want because it's not worth getting the bad ones. There are very much trap decisions in a bunch of games. I don't mean to pick on any one system, but I absolutely hate that we're going to put some abilities in that are feat taxes, right? Like they only exist to cost you some points to do something that you should already do. You have the ability to change into an animal. Would you like to cast a spell in that form? Sorry, you're going to have to take this other ability. Why? Why is that not base? Well, no. So, again, we looked through all of that. We tried to make sure that when you chose an ability, it was because it gave you something you wanted to do, not because you had to take it to do something you should have already been able to do.
So choices and player agency being at like a high point
Oh yes,
in
yes.
all of it.
Yes, if you're making your character, you should be making your character. I should not be making your character stealthily for you because I've set the game up in such a way that you can only make it this way or else.
How does that shape the narrative then?
Well, yeah, I had a whole list of things I was going to answer to this question, and I've already kind of said them all throughout this interview. So, in my experience as a game master, storyteller, the dungeon, whatever you want to call it this week, one of the biggest issues I've ever seen is just the power dynamic between the person running the game and the players. And yes, this is predominantly with newer groups, but even long time groups I've seen fall prey to this. For example, we've all seen that player versus DM argument, right? Like, my job is to kill the players, or my job is to beat the DM, and the story is the storyteller's story, and y'all are in my story. No, no,
We've all had GMs
no.
like that before.
Right. But that leads to a question, right? One of those base questions. Is the game master the ultimate authority of the game and the players are in pitched battle against him? Is the DM allowed to have fully fleshed out player characters, or is he taking agency away from the players? We've all been in that game where the DM has his character or her character, and they're the ones that solve all the traps and save the other players, and we're just kind of there. That was one of the big things we wanted to answer. And we can't answer it for every game, but we can answer it for us. So, the Shattered World is very much a cooperative storytelling game. This game is about the players and the narrator coming together to tell the story. That's why in our system, rather than game master or storyteller or dungeon master, we went with narrator. The narrator is absolutely responsible for laying out the broad strokes of the story, but it's better to think of them more like a TV showrunner than the writer. They're responsible for the big picture, setting out the hazards and the adversaries for the players to encounter, but the players themselves, through their actions or interactions, play an equal role in crafting the story. Partners, not opponents. Cooperation, not antagonism. Now, does that mean that you can't mess with the players a little bit? Of course not. Does that mean the players can't mess with the narrator a little bit? You better believe you can. That's half the fun. But again, that. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say you got to put your GM to the test.
Oh,
At least a little bit.
absolutely. And you've got to mess with your players. You have to. That's half the fun. Like if you're not screwing with each other a little bit, you're not really playing. But that's again, that's the thing. That's why I personally always insist on a session 0, right? That's where you sit down. Okay, this is the kind of story I want to tell. What kind of story do y'all want to tell? Are you comfortable with player versus player combat? Or would you rather it be, okay, you guys can like grumble and screw with each other, but you're not going to kill each other. You're always going to be there. Or nope, it's going to be no holds barred and I could screw you over, you could screw me over, let's see what happens. Okay, cool, as long as everybody's on the same page, do it, right? Like, if that's the story you want to tell, that's the story you want to tell. And as long as everyone's good with it, you're good with it.
Sounds like it has a lot to offer.
Yes, I hope so. I hope so. That's what we're aiming for.
With so much going for it, I'm sure there's plenty of mechanics to provide for all those things.
Yes. We have included crafting, we've included modification. Modification, the easiest way to think about it is everybody knows like the computer guy or the gun guy or the car guy, right? That type of person, they may buy a car off the showroom floor, or they may get a gun out of the gun store, or they may get their computer off, whatever website, but then they change it and they're immediately buying parts to modify what it can do, different types of bullets and different types of carburetors, up tinkering with the engine, and etc. etc. That is a big thing in the Shattered World, is item modifications. Basically your armaments, your weapons, your armor, your vehicles, buildings you can build, they can all be heavily modified to better reflect the kind of story y'all want to tell, to reflect the dangers that you guys are facing. Yeah.
Wow, I definitely can't wait to delve deeper into this. But I think with that, we're going to start wrapping up. And before we do, is there any sort of advice that you would give to aspiring tabletop RPG game designers who are just starting their journey?
Absolutely. So, the first part of what I'm going to say, no one is going to like. Nobody liked that. Hear me out until the end, I promise you. The most important thing I can tell you, bar none, you are going to fail. Harsh,
That's
right?
pretty harsh.
Yeah, it is. But here's what I mean by that. I mean, I'm awesome and none of you can come close to what I've done, so just don't do it. No, that's obviously not what I mean. Here's the deal. You are going to, and I know you're going to do this because I have done this at least a dozen times, you are going to come up with the perfect, never before seen, amazing mechanic that's just blows your mind, and it's going to blow everybody's mind, and you're going to show that mechanic to a buddy, and the buddy's going to glance at it, not even really look at it, just glance and go, yep, Mutants and Masterminds 1995 core rulebook page 342. And you're going to glare, and then you're going to go find that PDF of that, and you're going to look, and sure enough, in a game you've never played, you're going to find that mechanic word for word, and frankly, probably a little better. And that is going to crush you. It's going to suck. And that's fine. It's fine. Because that is how you learn and grow. You are going to fail, and that's fine. Because you can't edit a blank page, right? That old truism in writing. You can't edit a blank page. fail. Fail. Accept it. Embrace it. You're going to fail, and you're going to keep failing until you don't. And that is a great feeling. But too many people will fail that first time, that second time, that third time, and then stop.
It's like any skill, any learning, any craft.
Right. It's just like that. You did not learn to walk the first time you put one foot in front of the other. I guarantee it. You did not successfully ride a bike the first time you plopped your little butt onto a bicycle with training wheels. You fell. The first time those wheels came off, you face planted a lot. We forget that as adults. You are going to fail when you start designing a game. It's not going to work the way you thought it did. It's going to suck, and that is fine. Get a group of friends that you trust. Collaborate with other game designers because they are failing just as much as you. Don't put anyone on a pedestal. Learn, absolutely. If you're not reaching out to veteran game designers to see how they failed, you're going to fail even harder and longer. But don't think that you are uniquely sucking when you're doing this. We all fail. Like, I wish there was a better way of putting it. I know this sounds negative, but you're going to fail. Accept it. Embrace it. Fail the best that anybody has ever failed in the history of failing, because that is how you get good.
It's what they say, the most perfect plan fails at first contact.
Oh, all plans fail first contact with the enemy, my man, and sometimes enemy is reality. Yeah, you're absolutely right. No plan survives first contact with the enemy, but that's fine. Talk with your friends.
You learn. You evolve.
Yep, you learn, you evolve, you grow, you change, you figure it out. I have faith in all of y'all to do this. I can manage it, and I am no smarter or more gifted or better than any of you. I am failing just as hard as you are right now.
It's taken time.
It has.
Dedicated years.
Yes. I am going at an amazing clip, and I am still taking years. You've got this. Every one of you. You've got this. We've got this. Fail and grow. And that's what I got.
And that is fantastic advice. And can't wait to continue on more. We'll get back with the second time. But thank you, Alan, for joining me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to these development diaries regarding the Shattered World by myself, Raven, and Alan. We'd like to invite you to our page, Mr Biteys, on Facebook, or if you'd like to send us an email regarding this project or any of our other projects, you can send it to mrbiteysgaming@gmail.com. Thank you. Go grab that gear. Just entered the Shattered World.